Today's episode has been brought to you by Schedulicity.
Hello and welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. I'm a mom of 3, a yoga teacher, and a trainer and consultant who works for yoga teachers. This podcast was created for you so that you can connect to the information and inspiration every single week and feel supported. And I have to tell you that this interview with Diane made me feel so supported. It stuck with me after we did this live in the Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group. If you want to check out the video, it's on our YouTube channel. I'll actually link to that in case you want to see us chatting face to face. I just want to warn you that my internet must have been acting up that day and I'm blurry, but Diane is as clear as a bell. So I have been hearing from a lot of you connected yoga teachers that this is a challenging time. And collectively, we are living through a period of time unlike any other in recent history. Since the start of 2020, so many things have happened, including COVID-19, the global pandemic. Physical distancing has been enforced in many places, and many businesses have been shuttered. For a lot of us, our yoga business has been impacted in one way or another, whether it's because of our yoga studio being closed, or because we've had to transition to teaching classes online, or maybe our teaching schedule has just taken a huge hit and we're seeing fewer students or fewer classes on our calendar. So understandably, a lot of us are feeling like we're in a state of crisis, and we may not know how best to cope in this time. And that is why I'm so happy to share this episode today with Diane Liska. She's coming back onto the podcast because she's been here before to share with us some strategies for coping during crisis. So you might remember Diane back from episode 114. It's a favorite of our listeners. She talked to us about compassion fatigue. The link is in the show notes if you would like to go back and have a listen to that episode as well. It goes along really nicely with this episode. So as I said, this episode today was done live in our Facebook group. Diane shared her insights about how crisis affects our mind and our bodies. She really gets into the brain science. She loves to geek out on that. Diane also covers some techniques on how we can effectively manage the stress and strain that comes with being in crisis mode. And then we really dig into specifically this pandemic crisis, how it's affecting us, and how we can look at reopening, creating that safe space for our students, and also just acknowledging where everyone's at as things start to reopen or close in your area, really depending where we are in the world. And this is also an episode that you can come back to at any time when you're in crisis. So it doesn't have to be that we're in the midst of a pandemic. It could be any tough time in your life or any time where you're feeling like things are very overwhelming. All of our show notes are ready for you at theconnectedyogateacher.com/175. There you can find the links that we talk about along with clickable timestamps so you can go back and really hone on one topic that we covered. Before we dive in and meet Diane, I'd like to give a huge shout out of thanks to Laura Bowman, who is one of our podcast listeners. Laura wrote this online and I wanted to share it. Laura says, "I love the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. It has been such a wealth of information and my go-to source for all kinds of questions related to yoga and yoga business. Shannon has an amazing way of interviewing, asking on-point questions, and she dives deep into the subjects. I've learned so much about things I wanted to find out more about, but I also opened my eyes to new concepts, teachers, and ideas I would not have known about. As a yoga teacher, this really helps me to stay updated on what's happening in the yoga world so I can offer well-rounded classes, get to know other inspiring yoga teachers, and it helps me grow and develop my yoga business. I'm very grateful for all of the valuable interviews because it keeps me connected on so many levels." Thank you so much, Laura, for taking the time to write this review. I am super grateful for you doing that. I know days are busy and it just means so much that you paused things and took the time to leave us a review. If the podcast is supporting you, this is one of the best ways that you can say thank you. You can either leave a review in iTunes or on our Facebook page. And if you're wondering how to do that, just go to the show notes, go to the connectedyogateacher.com/175. I read each and every review, and I try and also make sure to read them out loud here on the podcast so that I can give a shout out to you. I also want to give a huge shout out of thanks to our sponsor, Schedulicity. Schedulicity is an online scheduling software, and they are also a company made of amazing people. The customer service there is unbelievable. If you heard me talking last week, I was super excited to announce that Schedulicity has just extended their pause of all payments. So if you are a North American yoga teacher, definitely check them out. The link is in our show notes. Here is our hot tip of the week from the team over there at Schedulicity.
Hey Connected Yoga teachers, this is Anna with the Schedulicity Hot Tip of the Week. Schedulicity is pleased to present improvements to our class booking feature. We worked with yoga businesses to find out what they really needed to make their business more successful and less stressful. Together, we developed group booking, online waivers, waitlists, and client alerts to help you manage the needs of your students and grow as a business. If you've been wondering how an online scheduler can help you specifically as a business, we'd love to tell you more. Email us anytime at support@schedulicity.com or visit schedulicity.com for more information and a chat with one of our support rockstars.
Thank you so much, Team Schedulicity. Alrighty, let's dive in and meet Diane. Diane Liska is a registered psychotherapist with over 10 years of experience in the mental health field, specializing in the areas of trauma, attachment, and neuroscience. She became a certified yoga teacher in 2015. I'm super excited to say that I got to witness Diane in her yoga teacher training. And she focuses on combining her expertise in these two fields of psychotherapy and yoga to help her clients navigate personal challenges and connect with their inner resources to cultivate wholeness, resiliency, and a strong body-mind connection. Diane has a private practice in Owen Sound, Ontario, Canada, just 20 minutes from me, where she offers her yoga-informed psychotherapy, and she regularly provides consultation and education services to healing professionals to cultivate responsible, authentic, and embodied therapeutic relationships. Now, I want to give a plug here for Diane that she has not said okay to, but I really need to tell you, if you are putting a yoga teacher training together, or you want to invite a guest speaker, I would highly recommend booking Diane, paying for her time and getting her to come and talk to your wellness professionals, your yoga teachers, anything about trauma, neuroscience, and how that weaves in with yoga. I know that Diane is super busy. I don't think she's taking on new clients right now at this time. But if given a bigger platform of people to talk to, a yoga teacher training, a virtual meeting, that might be one way to bring her to your audience. And have a listen now as we dive into this interview that was done live with Diane. Hey, Diane, it's great to have you here live. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast.
Thanks, Shannon, for having me. I've never been live on anything before, so this is pretty interesting.
Well, thanks for saying yes, because I was like, I think our people could use this right now. So I'm super excited that we can dig into. So I should also say welcome back, because you've already been on the podcast talking to us about compassion and fatigue. Tell our listeners who maybe don't know you, what is the work that you do and who do you do it for?
Sure. So I'm a registered psychotherapist, and I'm also a yoga teacher. And long story short, I've ended up at this place where I'm integrating those two paths, and I offer yoga-informed psychotherapy, also a mixture of somatics or just other types of body or bottom-up processing. And my area of expertise is healing from complex trauma or relational trauma.
That's amazing. And I'm so glad that you're here today when we're in what I would say as a collective, maybe we're in a place of I don't know what you call this. Would you call it that we're in trauma right now with everything that's going on with COVID-19? Or is it called something different when is it like a crisis or something? What would you label it as?
Um, I don't want to put one label on it because I think that it's different things for different people. I've definitely heard some individuals or newscasts or just blogs kind of referring to this as a pre-traumatic state. And although I don't want to perpetuate, anxiety or fear in individuals, I would agree that I think that there are a lot of themes that COVID is triggering, which absolutely could create the groundwork for some stored trauma in our nervous systems and experience. But I also think that it also parallels a lot of the grief process in just going from hearing the news, not really believing it, having that disbelief, to anger, to bargaining, to sadness, and hopefully making our way to acceptance. So I'm seeing kind of parallels in both of those fields, but regardless, you're absolutely right. It's a collective experience of suffering or pain or fear or grief. Yeah.
Oh, that's a really good way to look at it. Like I like thinking about how even I'm thinking back to my own reaction to everything with the grief process. That makes a lot of sense. There have definitely been different emotions.
Mhm.
So how I'd love some answers. And I know this is very general because we're all unique individuals,
Mhm.
but I'd like to know how can we, first of all, let's start with us as yoga teachers, because I think if we're not able to cope, it's really hard to show up and serve.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that. You know me, I'm all about co-regulation. And in essence, I don't care what strategy we know, what pranayamic practice we're an expert in. Doesn't matter to me if we can't regulate ourselves and be able to offer and enter into space with other people where they feel like they can co-regulate with us, and there can be this kind of calm energy exchange and dance in which we feel safe and secure and held, then no strategy is really going to be beneficial. So yes, we need to take care of ourselves first. The answer is I can't give you one specific thing, but what I was thinking I could do is just give some education on different brain states or remind people of different brain states. And what that does is it can help them to identify which state they might be mostly in right now, and to empower them and help them understand what types of strategies are likely going to be the most helpful for you right now. Is that okay?
Okay, that'd be amazing.
Yeah. So our brain has, this is oversimplified, but our brain basically has three different levels or states in which we can be in. So the first and oldest is the hindbrain, or what we call the brain stem. That's the lowest and oldest part of our brain. And it's basically responsible for breathing, sleeping, eating, and fight, flight, freeze, fawning, or accessing survival. And so its only concern, its only question is, am I safe? Okay, so that's the job of the brainstem. Am I
I
safe?
have two questions about this. You said the oldest part of our brain. I think you mean like as we have evolved as humans, not like it was formed first and then a few weeks later came this other
Both.
part of your brain. Both?
Both. So it's evolutionarily the oldest part of our brains, which means that reptiles have this part of our brain evolved from kind of reptiles, and dinosaurs probably. I don't know. I just threw that in there. Don't listen to that part. And live is awesome. and also it's part of connecting to our neural tube, like one of the first parts of our neural tube to be formed. And so the higher parts of our brain, or the mammalian or human cortex is formed last in development sequentially for an individual as well. So
Oh,
that
so cool. So then
yeah.
the other thing I wanted to ask you, you said fight, flight, freeze. Did you say fawn? What is that?
Yeah. So that's just another type of survival response. And I feel like we would get onto a big tangent if I explain that
Okay.
right now. But basically, just know that it's another type of survival response when we learn how to appease or people please others in a way to really survive and protect ourselves.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So the brainstem, and I'm going to use Dan Siegel's hand model because it's so great to teach and understand. So what he says is the brainstem is comparable to our wrist, and it's the lowest part of our brain. And then what we have is this midbrain, or our emotional and relational world. So it's controlling our emotions and relationships, basically. And that's our midbrain, and that sits like our thumb on top of our wrist. And then what we consider our human brain is called learning brain. And that's the prefrontal cortex that wraps around and sits on the brainstem and the midbrain. So, brainstem, am I safe? Midbrain is basically concerned about, am I loved? Am I connected? So it's mostly related to relationships and emotions, which is also connected to our sense of safety, as I'm sure that
Right.
you've felt before too. And so those two parts of our brain make up what we consider our downstairs brain. And then our upper tier brain is really this prefrontal cortex, which is our executive functioning, our problem solving, our ability to learn, use a filter, discernment, all of these things that we really like to be able to access and help us learn are in the prefrontal cortex. And so I've already alluded to this. The question of the prefrontal cortex is, what can I learn from this? And so the important piece of understanding here is that when an area of the downstairs brain is triggered or experiences significant stress, so either we don't feel safe or we don't feel safe because we don't feel connected or loved, what happens is those lower parts of our brain become stressed and activated. And what happens consequentially is that our lid, or our prefrontal cortex, literally flips off. So learning brain is not that accessible when these lower brain states are being triggered. So why this is important is because when somebody asks, what do I need right now? How can I cope? What I'm always first interested in is trying to understand what brain part are they in right now, because it's going to help identify what they need most. So if they're mostly focused on, I don't feel safe, so it feels like the world's closing in on me, feels like I don't have financial stability right now, I don't know how to feed my family, like true, real threats, then we want to focus on bringing in resourcing to help them create a felt sense of safety. The felt sense of safety is the only way that the brainstem starts to calm down. And so it's important to be able to try and identify, what is it that's making me feel or causing me to feel unsafe right now.
So when you said bring in resources, I was thinking, does this mean that we find them, like, let's say it really is a thing where they're having trouble feeding their family? Like, is that what you mean by resources? Not like, here, do this breathing technique.
Yeah, so it can be both. Absolutely. Sometimes the reality is that they absolutely just need food on the table. And me telling them to go meditate in that moment to feel calm is probably intentionally trying to come from a good place, but probably inadvertently shaming or perpetuating some judgment to systematic inequalities that exist. That being said, what can also happen is sometimes our brain gets stuck in the future, like these what if questions. Well, what if I can't put food on the table? What if my loved one is going to get sick with COVID? What if? And so if that's the case that's making them feel unsafe in that moment, then what I recommend is grounding and orienting, which means checking in with the present moment. What can I see, hear, taste, smell, touch around me right now? Can I see that my family is safe right now? Can I notice that there is food here right now? To try and help to soothe some of these scarcity messages that might be triggered with, COVID and our current state. But I would say that there's a difference between anxiety and true just fear or stress, in that anxiety is usually a term we use when our mind is blowing things out of proportion. But I really want to acknowledge that there's a whole lot of very real stress going on right now, given current circumstances.
Yeah. I was thinking, when this, maybe not right away, but when I had some time of reflection, I was thinking, generations like my kids, which they're like 15 and older, I was thinking, oh, we were all saying they have it so easy, or I had heard that. And now look at, that's not what's really going on right now for everyone, all ages, all generations.
Absolutely. And I think the thing is that each of our scenarios is unique. It's unique in that the specifics that we're experiencing are unique to us and unique to our stories and unique to our life experiences and narratives. And at the same time, pretty much everyone I've had a conversation with, we can map back to feeling afraid, feeling grief, feeling suffering right now. And so in that, there's also collective connection. So I don't know, it's both. And so that's that's like a brief snapshot of what you can do if you're focusing on, or if you need to feel, am I safe? Can you orient or ground to the present moment? And or how do we bring in extra resources to literally help nourish those areas of scarcity right now, which may be very true or not. I don't know.
Right. Okay, that's so good. Somebody is just saying, amazing woman to have on today. So wonderful. I can't see who it is, because sometimes you have to allow it to do that. I wonder if anybody watching live has questions for you. You can always pop it in the chat here. I'm not going to look at the chat the whole time, otherwise I get distracted. Mm-hmm. So then sorry, go ahead, Diane.
Oh, I was just going to say, so that's the first tier of safety, is kind of like the brainstem. And then we also talked about how relationships or feeling loved or connected can also help us feel safe. And then, so I would say the second tier, if the first more primal stuff feels like it's okay to you, then the second part is to check in with relationships. And this is why I think connecting via video, people getting really creative of like how they're connecting with each other. I love, love, love to hear those stories. Also remember, or know, maybe learn for the first time, that the brain doesn't know the difference between actually doing something and visualizing that you're doing it. And so if you're really missing a dear loved one and you can't connect with them physically in this moment, or face to face, or even through video, know that you can use a visualization practice to just start to track felt senses of what it feels like to be with them. Maybe your memory of how they would hold you, or just, play a game with you. And that can help to soothe in the moment as well.
Oh, that's really nice. It's reminding me, I went to a yoga class last week online, and there was a meditation that was, let's imagine that we're being held by a loved one. And that was really sweet to bring in. So, Oh, this is nice. And So that takes care of, I say it like it's easy, but that looks at like our safety. And then the next part, this thumb part of the brain. And then what about the prefrontal cortex? Is
Yeah.
it having trouble coping as well?
Um, it it's more like absolutely it's having trouble coping, but not from a like deep primal kind of am I safe, really anxious, angsty kind of stuff coming up. But this is where I feel like when people can get access into their prefrontal cortex, if that is available to you right now, and honestly, there is no judgment or no shame if that does not feel accessible. Um, is then we can start to look at, well, what can I learn from this? What what might I want to, what practices do I want to keep from this time period of where things have kind of been thrown into upheaval? What do I want to let go of now that I have some clarity or some spaciousness from my, more typical stressors in life? Did I have a really busy schedule? Do I want to include more time with my family? We can start to reflect on that. And I also think that as yoga teachers, again, Shannon, you know me, I'm very passionate about a svadhyaya practice, not in the sense of maybe looking at ancient texts. Not saying that I devalue that. I'm just saying that's not my area of expertise and passion. But from a state of, what can we learn about ourselves is my experience. I'm going to be specific, my personal experience and the experience of all the work that I've been doing with many clients right now, is one that I'm seeing a lot of old wounds or triggers resurfacing from this kind of COVID state and themes. So, like, theme of isolation, theme of unpredictability, theme of when is this going to end, theme of, I don't know, just there's lots, helplessness. There's lots of kind of underlying themes that chances are younger parts of ourselves still hold and still feel very like scared or threatened by, that are kind of coming up during this time. So if you're someone who's been noticing kind of old coping patterns, old survival patterns, or even if in your memory, like it's been kind of drifting to some pieces or experiences from in the past, I would say that's pretty normal right now. And to also just be able to identify that younger part of us that might be really struggling right now. And, we can over time learn how to go back to that younger part of ourselves and offer it what it needed in the first place. So maybe it just needed a safe adult to offer it a hug or tell them it's going to be okay or whatever it was. We can learn how to do that for ourselves when we look towards and realize that there are these younger parts of ourselves that might be struggling right now.
That's really good. And this is where this svadhyaya comes in, this self-study. I'm guessing that the first part is just to be aware of it. Like, oh, look at me freaking out here.
Yeah, and just here I am. Oh, having a witness online, and it takes practice and time to develop this. And also just recognizing our own humanness. Oh, I'm a whole human being with really great stuff and strengths, and there's stuff that's happened to me that also impacts my story and my narrative and who I am that is sometimes hard and difficult and painful. And yeah, I'm just a whole human being. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Is there anything that you see, like, do you have any examples of people who are trying different things and that is really working for them right now?
Mm-hmm. You mean in the context of kind of recognizing these younger wounds or parts? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, one practice that it tends to be really helpful to a lot of people is what's called a reparenting practice. And that is when we, from adult self, go back to our younger self and offer them the resource that they needed at that time. And so maybe it was they needed a safe adult to give them a hug. And so, what we do is we use visualization to see our adult self go back to our younger self and offer them that healing and nourishment. And the reason that we use ourself in the visualization, if possible, sometimes that doesn't feel so accessible right away for many different reasons, um, is because we're the person who knows exactly what it's like to feel that pain. And when we connect with that, we're not going to let ourselves down.
Right. Oh, that's so good. Thanks for clarifying that's who we would choose
Yeah.
is someone who knows us that well and really that we're that person.
Yeah. Yeah. Or if there's a really, really, really safe adult or friend or person that you're connected with, then absolutely you can use them, but they have to feel like really safe in order to do that. Yeah.
Right. And so I don't know if it's just my circle of my life, my friends, acquaintances that I have, but I see what it feels like to me, and even our team has noticed it maybe a little bit more in our connected yoga teacher group or different places online, is that people seem like they're right on their edge of kind of losing it. Like something, if you know someone really well, it almost, and I feel it in myself as well at different times, is like something that wouldn't bother me as much will bother me a lot more. So can you talk to maybe why that is and what we might try and do in that instance?
Sure. So first of all, I would just say that it sounds like somebody is moving really close outside of their window of tolerance. So we all have a window of tolerance or amount of space where we feel like we can navigate stress well. And then outside of our window of tolerance is usually when we're kind of reaching and grabbing for survival mechanisms. And so I would say people who look like they're kind of or feeling like just on that edge or threshold, that's the language that we would use to kind of just notice. And so I don't know the reason why, because again, it's personal, but I'm going to just put some questions out there. Okay. Number one, can you identify what specific themes about right now feel the most stressful or overwhelming to you? So that would be something to reflect on. And the other question I'm going to ask is, and this may or may not be true for people, were you really doing that well before? Or is it possible that these themes were present before, but we were so busy and, jumping from thing to thing to thing that our awareness was not such that we could just take time to just notice and reflect in? And I don't know the answer to that, but I would just put that out there too.
Right. Oh, those are such good questions. I love that it's like, what is the theme? That's really good wording.
Mhm.
I'm going to try and remember these two things. What's the theme that's going on here right now? And the second part summarized is, it's already gone from my mind.
Is it
Help me out.
possible that some of these themes were already there,
Oh, right.
but
And it was just the space.
that our busy lives or whatever were kind of just putting a veil between us and these themes, let's say. Um, and now that we're kind of being forced to hang out at home, not really go from thing to thing and activity to activity, that it's just that they're just more in our face. I don't know.
Right. We're sitting with ourself a little bit more. Some
Mhm.
of us are. I mean, there are
Yeah.
some people who are still very busy out on the front lines as our essential workers as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been thinking about that in terms of the episode that you and I did together with compassion fatigue. I know that I hit a time where I was like, I just need to help all of the yoga teachers out in the world. And I thought at the end of that week, I was like, okay, I can't run like that. I can't keep going like that. I recognized it and did a lot of self-care until I felt like, okay, now I'll come back to answering questions and finding solutions. What's really interesting about that time is I couldn't actually find solutions. Like I was, how do I put this? It was like a light bulb moment once I took a break from it and came back. I was like, I don't need to have all of the answers. Like I can call on this collective group of people, but I couldn't see that in that space of
because
burnout.
you weren't in prefrontal cortex.
Right.
You weren't in your learning brain state. So something triggered you. I hope you don't mind me saying this.
Not at all.
Into a younger or an older brain state that made you kind of frantically run around and look. And I would ask the question, and please don't feel the need to answer this online, but just like for personal reflection, what part of you felt like they were responsible in running around and trying to help all the people? Have you felt that before in your life? And if so, where, and can you take care of that part of yourself? And
that's good.
Okay. And just kind of like go back to that younger self and help it know that it's not responsible for whatever the circumstance was that was going on in your life. Because chances are they were the one that got triggered and came up that made you kind of have a week of frantically feeling like you need to help all the people and do all the things before you were able to come back into this kind of prefrontal cortex state, or another way that I would say it, or maybe we know in the yoga world, is kind of return to self, kind of feel anchored and centered into that true self. And then from that place, we can make a wisdom-led kind of decision.
Yeah, because up until that point, it was like the answers weren't even there. That's a really, like, not always am I able to see that, 3 weeks later, but I feel like and still there's so much that is, I don't know, in talking with friends and talking with people that I'm working with, there's a lot coming up for a lot of people. I hear a lot of, like when you said the safety, like the whole safety around money and scarcity right now is very real for us, whether that's real rooted in what's actually happening with our finances, or very real in how we feel about it.
Absolutely.
Or both.
Absolutely. And I think that's why for me, it's just essential to try and lead with compassion for everyone and their experience, because everybody is struggling in their own unique way for a damn good reason. I've never ever met someone that when I hear their personal story, that their triggers and how they respond and how they cope and how they survive, it always makes sense once I hear somebody's, history, or they share their narrative. Mm-hmm.
And so I have another question before we close, and our people who are watching live are also welcome to pop some questions into the chat here. I know when our yoga students we were just before closing, there was a lot of fear from our yoga teachers about, like, how do I make this a safe space emotionally and physically? And I think for those of us who are either reopening, we have some teachers in the US who are reopening. We have some teachers around the world that never did have a shutdown, like we've had here in Canada or in different places in the US. Or around the world. And so I'm wondering if you have any tips for us in terms of conveying or creating safe space as people start to look at their options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that creating safe space is far more important than conveying it, because people, having a felt sense of safety is what we're really looking for here, versus just saying, this is a safe space. I think that if we consider the brain states, just know that people are going to be in different areas and states at different times. And so I would start with assuming that some people are struggling to feel safe. And if that's the case, then, and that's why I always start, me personally, a yoga practice with kind of grounding and orienting to the space, that time to literally connect with, okay, here are the four walls around me. This is a place in the room that I would feel good. This is something that I can touch or see or smell that feels safe and good to me in this present moment. And then starting to bring our practice inwards a little bit. I think that that's essential, just to kind of catch if anybody is in that brain state. And then also connection. I think that that's a really common underlying theme that's being triggered here, right? From day one, I remember hearing about social distancing, and even just hearing that term, I was like, yuck. There's a part of me that just doesn't even like that term, because as human beings, we all yearn to feel connected and loved, and so focusing
Do you
on,
use the term physical distancing then instead?
yeah.
So maybe we want to keep an eye on if we have that on our website, or if we say that in our email to someone, like now that we're doing physical distancing, even that right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think that it communicates a really important intention that I'm following recommended health guidelines of keeping some physical distance between you. And my intention is I still want to be here with you and in relationship with you. I think that that's really important. So focusing on connection, as well, I think in the yoga practice can be really, really helpful. So like meditations or some variant of kind of loving kindness, or I also think practicing in a circle is just a really beautiful way to bring people together again. Again, that's I always prefer to practice in a circle. Those would be some things. And then just creating space, like safe space for people to just say if they're not doing well, or letting you know ahead of time before class, maybe genuinely reaching out to people before class and just saying, how you doing? And not from a place where you're going to try and fix it or solve it for them, because you probably can't, but just genuinely connecting with them. Because that in and of itself can help people to feel safe again. That co-regulation piece that we kind of talked about initially.
That's great.
Yeah.
I have one other question. I felt like that was going to be my last question, but now there's something else. What about, and we are hearing this, here in North America, we're hearing that people are starting to want to get out more. They don't want to stay at home. And so we even know from cell phone data that just people are wandering out more. And I know that there are different people in my life, and I can look at them and think, why are they going there? Why are they visiting with this person? Or someone posted on social media, or some of my friends have said, I feel like I'm being judged. Like if I go to the grocery store and have to go twice in 1 week or something. Or is there something that you can offer in terms of, what about when we're feeling that restlessness, like we feel like we can't stay home?
Mm-hmm.
And what if we see it in someone else? Because I'm sure it's not helpful for us to say, you should do this.
Yeah. So, so if we come to it just from the context of restlessness, I love interoception. So that awareness of the inner landscape of your body. And so I would say, can you look in and reflect what areas of your body are literally feeling restless? Is it your legs? Is it your arms? Is it your jaw? Like what part, is it your whole self? I don't know, but what parts of you are feeling restless? And then move those parts. And I mean in intense energy, okay? You may me too. Look, there was one day where I started a yoga practice down in the basement a couple of weeks ago, and I ended up doing a kickboxing practice because I started for like 4 minutes and I knew in my body, I'm like, nope, no way. Like this feels so disconnected with where I truly am right now. I am angry that I have to stay inside. I am angry that it feels like somebody's telling me I have to do something. And that part of me got triggered and I was like, no, I need to fight it out. So I did like a kickboxing and a boxing practice, and that felt so much better. So I'm not saying that that's exactly what you have to do, but if you're feeling that restlessness, pay attention to the parts of your body that are feeling the restlessness and how can you help them move that energy out, literally discharge that energy out of your body.
Oh, that's really good.
Yeah. And then
it's not like we could make someone else do that. Maybe children, we could do that with our children. Let's dance around or chase each other, go play tag or something.
In our house, we encourage our young son hitting a pillow because I would rather have him do that than internalize all of his stress.
This is good.
Yeah. So the second part of your question, I think, was what do we do when we see somebody else doing the thing?
It's all kinds of things that are being judged all over the place. You know, are you wearing a mask when you go? Like someone wrote to me, Shannon, you're not wearing a mask when you're out walking. I was like, well, I'm out walking with my family.
Yeah.
I live with them.
Right. Right. I think that people are genuinely doing the best that they can. And if somebody is out and about against recommendations, I'm not saying I condone that. And I absolutely have compassion for that because, again, in the context of their story, that probably makes darn sense. I've heard, I'm working with people actively right now who feel so much shame in needing to say, reach out to a grandparent or having another family come help when they're parenting children. But the reality is they're feeling suicidal right now, or they're going to end up back in hospital with a significant, medical issue. And so when we have the broader picture, it almost always makes sense. And so lead with compassion. I don't know.
That's really good that it makes sense. When we could see the whole picture, often we are just seeing a tiny snapshot of something.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. This has been so helpful, Diane. You always have so much wisdom to offer. You break things down like this 3 parts of our brain in a great way. So thanks for taking the time to do that. And thank you so much.
Yeah, you're so welcome, Shannon. Thanks for the opportunity to just connect with everyone right now. Even though I can't see you, know that I'm just sending some compassion out everywhere.
If our yoga teachers are interested in working with you further, how can they do that?
They can go to my website, www.dianeliska.com. Look at you, you're so good. And I think there's like a work with me section. I can't remember what it's called, but you can look on there and book online.
All right, that's great. Thank you so much, Diane.
Oh, thanks, Shannon.
Alrighty, connected yoga teachers, I want to hear from you. What was your key takeaway? As I said in my introduction, I am just so grateful to live near Diane, to be able to talk to her, to have her on this podcast. And I also have to share that while we were doing this interview, Diane had asked me to reflect on my own personal life and one element that was going on in my personal life and my reaction to when the pandemic hit. And that has stuck with me. I feel like I got some free counseling or some free insight into my own personal reaction and how I react in a crisis. And that little piece has then stuck in my mind and I'm just noticing. So I'm wondering, after you had to listen to the episode, if there was something that you realized, oh, that's my pattern of reacting. And if there's some key takeaway, I would love to hear about it in the show notes. So you can find the show notes at theconnectedyogateacher.com/175. And Diane is also a member of our Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group. So if you have a question for her or a comment after listening to today's episode, jump into our Facebook group and tag her in that and ask away or share your key takeaways there. If you are wanting to work together, Connected Yoga Teachers, there are a couple of ways that you can do that right now if you're listening in real time. One is to book a consultation call with me. If you go to theconnectedyogateacher.com, up at the top you can see Work with Shannon. The other way is to study with me, and the next yoga teacher training is all about pelvic health. So it's Yoga for Pelvic Health. It's normally a 20-hour in-person yoga teacher training. There are very few spots left, but it is happening online now for 2020 due to the pandemic. We've revamped the schedule. You'll still get your manual for it, and we are going to do this on Zoom in a really unique and cool way so that it is like being in person. As much as possible, we're bringing all of the elements that we can of the in-person training. To find out about that, you can go to theconnectedyogateacher.com and look under trainings and events. I want to send a huge shout out of thanks to our team over here, Suzanne, Crunch, Nick, and Sinead. All of you are so amazing. You make so much possible behind the scenes. And also, thank you, dear Connected Yoga Teacher listener. This podcast exists because of you. And so I want to know, before I sign off, what will you be doing this week to stay connected? Maybe to yourself, your yoga practice, or to your community, so that you can share the yoga that lights you up.